everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening from wherever you are joining us from around the world to our FOSSI family. Thank you for taking the time to join us for our second conversation in conservation. We are so glad to host you on this next topic, the secret life of male gorillas. And who better to talk to us today than our very own President, CEO, and Chief Scientific Officer, Dr. Tara Stawinski. And joining her today is our Program Manager, Veronica Bachelio. As mentioned, when you received your invitation, together they have over 50 years of experience studying these amazing animals. So I think we are in very good hands and in for quite a treat today. If you joined us for our first in this series, welcome back. We're glad that you're joining us again. And if this is your first time with us today, thank you for taking the time to be with us. We developed these series so that you, as our leadership donors, can have time for both updates, but also to get a little bit of a deeper insight into the work that we are doing in critical programs and our pillars of work. So we really hope that you enjoy your time with us today. So a little bit of housekeeping. Everyone is muted, as you will see. But as you go through the discussion, if things pop to mind and you feel you want to put a question, please enter that into the Q&A or the chat box. We will try to get to those as well as the pre-submitted questions as much as we can towards the end of the program. As with technology, bear with us as we will be hopefully free from issue as we get started into today's program. Also, as we mentioned, this is our second in this series, but look forward to, as we enter into 2021, we're going to be continuing these with a lot more variety of subject matter to come. So we're really excited about it. So without further ado, I would like to turn this over, and I really hope you enjoy today's topic. Our President and CEO and Chief Scientific Officer, Dr. Tara Stawinski, take it away.
Thanks so much, Sherry. And I just want to reiterate what Sherry said, and thank you all for being here. I'm just going to take a moment to put my, get my screen going. Hold on one second. Here we go. There we go. Wonderful. Well, we're so excited to be here with you today to talk about one of my absolute favorite topics on the planet, and that is male gorillas. So what I wanted to do, just to give you an idea of the agenda, is I am going to give you a quick update on what's happening in the field, and then I'll bring on my colleague, Veronica Bachelio. We're going to go back and forth with some of our gorilla stories, and then, as Sherry mentioned, we're really excited to hear from you. So please put your questions in the chat box. We also have some questions that you sent in, so thanks for doing that. I wanted to start off by sending a warm welcome from the whole FOSSI Fund family. You will see here is our team in Rwanda. And actually, this is probably a better photo to be showing you guys because it is the height of the rainy season, and this has been a particularly bad one. So this is what our teams are facing every day when they're out there. So I just love to remind people that this is what the day-to-day life of a gorilla researcher and tracker is like. From our last conversation, if you were with us, you'll probably remember that I spent a good bit of time talking about COVID, and I would like to update you on that. The two biggest areas where COVID has impacted us is making sure that it doesn't get into the gorilla population, because we think that they're very likely susceptible to it like us, and also supporting the communities around the park who have been really affected by the pandemic. And I was extremely lucky to travel over, I love this photo, to travel over in September, October, and get to see our teams. So our teams are working in isolation, and they have been since March. So they're tested before they go on rotation. They're separated from their families and the communities. They're living in remote camps. And this is one of those remote camps. And I just love seeing the smiles on all of their faces. They're not wearing masks because they've been tested and we know they're negative. But it was wonderful to see them. And people are saying, you know, we haven't missed a day in the forest yet. And why that's so important is we are seeing a big increase in snares. So we're on track to collect double the amount of snares this year out of the forest that we collected last year. And I really want to emphasize that, you know, that's a risk to the gorillas as well as to the other wildlife. And the support that you give us has enabled us to not miss a single day in the field despite these challenging conditions. So thank you very much for that. So that's sort of on the gorilla, the tracking side. I did also want to mention some work that we've been doing with local communities, and I apologize, my computer seems to, there it goes. Okay. Obviously, local communities are really struggling. And so we've been trying to increase what we're doing to support them. And there's one story that really touched my heart. If any of you have been to Rwanda, you might have seen this sign. This is the Guerrilla Guardians Village. This is actually a group of ex-poachers who came together and started a tourism-based industry so that they could make money and not have to rely on the forest. And so you can go there and visit them, and they sort of show you what it's like to live in a traditional Rwandan village. Well, with the onset of the pandemic and the stopping of tourism, obviously they've lost their livelihood and have been very badly affected. And so they reached out to us and asked if we would mind supporting them. And so I was really pleased that we were able to deliver over 4,000 pounds of food and other supplies to them. This is our team delivering those supplies. But what really touched me about this story was that, we could have just dropped them off and they could have said thank you, but absolutely not. In traditional Rwandan style, they put on a show for our staff, they danced, they sang, and they really thanked us and said, we're so grateful for you helping us in this time of need, and we will be wonderful ambassadors to the gorillas and your work. So just a very moving experience. And again, thank you for enabling us to continue to help the local communities during this challenging time. So we have had 11 babies actually born this year, which is a great number. Unfortunately, we have lost a number of them, all to natural causes, but we've had a challenge with infanticide, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later. This is when two groups come together and the infants of the males of the other group are actually targeted. And so we have lost a number of infants for this year to infanticide. So we really hope that this one will have a long and healthy life. And sorry, I'm still having some issues here with my, let's see if this is going to be the charm. All right. One more. And here we go. Let's see. There we go. Awesome. All right. So just to sum up, sorry about that, everyone. We talked a little bit about the trackers and how they haven't missed a day in the field. They're doing well. They're staying isolated. They're healthy, and the gorillas are healthy. We talked about our expanding work to help local communities that we've had. Nzeli, we just saw that picture of Nzeli's adorable baby, just came in now. And what I want to do quickly is talk about our work in Congo. For those of you, just as I always like to refresh people because people aren't as familiar as with our work in Congo, there we're working to protect the critically endangered Growers gorillas. And hopefully you might be able to see my cursor, but this is a huge area, and most of the Growers gorillas live outside of protected areas. And so we've been working for the last decade to establish a community reserve. And what is amazing to me about this community reserve it is 30 times the size of the area that we protect for mountain gorillas in Volcanoes National Park. It's huge. It's 330,000 acres. And what's more exciting to me about this is that we are expanding. Given the critical situation facing Growers gorillas, and also the fact that most of them don't live in a national park and so they aren't protected, we're actually expanding our habitat. So what you see in dark green here is the current Nkuba Conservation Area. So that's where we're currently working. And all the various other colors are different landowners that we're talking to, we're in conversations with right now about expanding and adding on to Nkuba. So our goal is to get to 500,000 acres of protected land in the next few years. I wanted to switch now to talking just a little bit about our campus. You probably know that we are building a future for gorillas. And I am thrilled to say that despite all of the challenges of building a campus halfway around the world during a global pandemic, that the situation is going extremely well, and we are still on course to open next year. We literally just got this time lapse in from the field. I think we released it yesterday, maybe on social media. And so I wanted to share it with you. Just to orient you a little bit, I would look most closely up here in the front. This is the Sandy and Harold Price Research Center, and this is the one that you'll see change most during the time lapse. Again, to orient you, back here, we have the Cindy Broder Conservation Gallery. That's where our public exhibit will be. This is our education center, where all the classrooms and computer labs and library will be. And again, then our research center, where our staff and labs will be. So we'll get this going. And this is September, October time, so it's already a little bit dated. You can see the beautiful views of the volcano. You see all three back there when the clouds aren't there. You'll see Sabino, Gahinga, and Morabora. And on the other side, we can see Karasimbi and Bisoki. And what I love about this is you see basically very little equipment. This is all locally fabricated. We're providing over 600 jobs to people in the community around the park. And this picture actually came in this week, just to show you again. Here's the research center, and you can see that now the subroofing is actually on the research center. So we're absolutely thrilled that this project is proceeding, and it's making such a difference. The actual construction is making such a difference for the community. We also were thrilled that earlier this year, CNN identified the campus as one of the 10 most anticipated architectural projects that are upcoming in Africa. So it's wonderful to see the accolades and the excitement about this green construction project. So to let you know what's coming for us in the upcoming year, Rwanda, we will still really be focused on the issues around the pandemic. So expanding our protection, making sure that those snares are removed from the forest, and also expanding our community support while we're dealing with COVID-19. In Congo, we'll be finalizing the expansion area and begin actually doing protection work. So once we have those communities on board, start getting trackers into the field. And then finally, we'll be doing fundraising for the final push of our campus, and there are still opportunities to get involved, as well as I mentioned, we hope to be open in August, September of 2021. So with that, I'd love to turn to the topic at hand, and I'm going to invite my colleague and very good friend, Veronica, to turn on her camera and microphone. Hi, Veronica.
Hi, everyone.
I can't see you, but I know you're there. So Veronica is you know, I'm honored to call her a friend and a colleague. She's been studying gorillas for more than 20 years. If you've been to Rwanda, you may have met her. She's one of my absolute favorite people to talk about gorillas with. I can't tell you how many conversations we've had over breakfast, over dinner, over lunch, talking about gorillas. One time we had a visitor who was eating dinner with us, and at one point he stopped and he said, all right, I'm just checking. We are talking about gorillas right now, not people, right? But they're very much a part of her family and mine. And so I'm excited that we can share our stories today. So to put it in context, oh no, my computer froze again. Why are we talking about males? Here it goes. Why are we talking about male gorillas? And I think this picture really typifies it. I mean, they loom so large in our culture when you think about things like King Kong and, you know, Godzilla and all the movies that have been made about gorillas. People are endlessly fascinated by them. And you can see why here. This is the iconic, you know, silverback chestnut, one of the most famous probably animal displays in the animal kingdom. But from a gorilla perspective, they're incredibly interesting. Most primates, the whole, you know, social relationships really revolve around female-female friendships. That's kind of the core of primate society. And gorillas are very different. Gorillas, the males, really are kind of the glue of the gorilla society. And they play an incredibly important role in moderating their, you know, what happens in the group and being leaders and being protectors. And so they become fascinating to watch. And in addition, in mountain gorillas, unlike the other 3 subspecies of gorillas, we get multi-male groups, where you have multiple males living together with females. We don't see that in the other 3 types of gorillas. So it means not only do you have these fascinating dynamics between the females, but you also have dynamics between the males to watch as well. And then they're just super impressive. So this is one of my favorite photographs of Veronica. She's standing here with Isabukuru, and it's not a distorted image, it's a real photograph. It's just the angle makes him actually seem larger than life. And so I'd like to actually ask Veronica the first question of the day. And Veronica, I know that you love Isabukuru, but he is not your favorite gorilla, male gorilla. And I wanted to ask you, who is your favorite male gorilla?
I do love Isabukuro, and I hate to tell who is my favorite, but now I will, because I always seem to be unfair for the others, but let's do it. My favorite is Isabukuru's brother. The name is Kansby. And this is a photo that I have with him. It was just a privilege. Every second I was with him. And what I love the most of Kansby is that we actually know his whole life. He born when Diane Fossey was there, and Diane Fossey named him. And the story of his name is pretty funny, because Diane thought that Kansby's mother Pak was a male, and as she had Cansby as her first baby, Diane said, "It can't be." And then this sentence was then transformed into Cansby. What I love of him is like knowing a member of your own family, and the respect, that's the feeling of respect that we all have in his presence. This is what I love the most about him.
Thank you, Vero. I love hearing you talk about him. I wanted to share my favorite gorilla. So this is Titus. This is probably from like 2003 when Veronica and I, Veronica's worked for the Fosse Fund for 16 years, or I have for 18 years. So we have a lot of old photos of ourselves that are popping up. But Titus was just such a special gorilla. He was one of the first gorillas I was able to study. Also was around the Dian Fosse's time, had a very traumatic childhood. His dad was Uncle Bert, who was killed by poachers. His brother was Digit, who was killed by poachers. And yet he went on to become one of the most successful males that we have ever studied. And it was really his personality. He was my first exposure to wild gorillas, and he was so gentle and calm, and he radiated that throughout his group. He was a real diplomat and gentle leader. And so I loved spending time with him. Even though there were lots of males around, you never felt nervous when you were around Titus. So Veronica, next question for you. Can you tell us a little bit about, the various stages that male gorillas go through in life?
Well, that is a very great question to answer, because it's really a remarkable development. As you can see in this photo, a comparison with between an infant gorilla and an adult gorilla male. And I can say that when they're born, they are just about 4 pounds, and they grow up to be 400 pounds when they are fully developed. So it's a pretty remarkable growth in for gorilla male that we are privileged to observe. What about the stage of their life? Let's say that at young age, up to 8, they spend most of their time playing, establishing friendships, and a lot of the friendship that they establish in young age, they continue for the lifetime. So it's a very important time of their life. They also try to imitate the grown-ups male, because eventually they have to become silverback one day. Look at this baby, looking at this reflection on this paddle and practicing the chest beats. Like eventually all gorillas become really good chest beaters. And the gorilla male have a huge responsibility, because chest beats has a great meaning for gorilla. So you can see how he keeps doing, and one day he will be one silverback. After this infancy phase, let's say from 8 years old, they start to mature, and this is the time where their body size really grow a lot. So in this photo, you can see in one young male gorilla, but is still already 8 years old. We call them blackback, and behind they are fully grown male gorillas that we call them silverbacks. This is the time, so from 8 to 15, that they change the color on the back. So that is why from black they become silver, and that is why we call them silverback. And so when they are really fully grown, as in this photo, their temperament change. They start getting a lot of more responsibility. They have a decision to take. They are much more mature. And one of the biggest decisions of their life come at this point, when they really have to decide if staying in the natural group and live as subordinate of the dominant, and maybe hoping for a change of rank later in life, or they can decide to leave the group as a solitary male, hoping to attract females from another group and eventually form their own group. And so it's a very important decision to take.
Yeah, and one of the research questions we asked a few years ago, we were really interested, why do some males choose to stay and why do some males choose to go? And they go around the age of 15, that's generally when they leave, which is also when they've reached full body size. But we found two primary things that predicted whether a male would stay or go. And what was interesting is they aren't forced out by the silverback, they do make that choice. So one you might not be that surprised by, and it's whether or not they get to copulate. It doesn't necessarily mean they're siring offspring, but at least they get to practice. But the other reason that seemed to influence whether they stayed or left really did surprise us, and this photo typifies that, and it's whether or not their mom is still in the group. So this is Wenge, that's his mom, Ginseng. And if a male has his mother in the group, he's much more likely to stay in the group. And they don't really hang out together, but it just shows that that mom is still probably helping to influence his social relationships in the group, and that might help males make the decision to stay. So Veronica, when we have these multi-male groups, which as we said are unique to mountain gorillas, can you talk a little bit about the different roles that the males in the group have?
Yes, in every gorilla group, there is a one and only number one. And this number one is called dominant silverback. Regardless if there are other males in the group, so other silverbacks, there is only one that is the dominant. So the dominant silverback in each group is the core of the group. You can see in this photo, he is in the middle. You recognize him from the white belt on the back. The silverbacks, and everyone is around him. So being near the silverback, the dominant silverback, is a great privilege. It's a very strong bond. When you observe gorilla, you really realize how this relationship is important. You see this other photo where females really laying their face on the back of the silverback, just to show the affection and the strength of the relationships that they develop with the dominant silverback. And what is also important to notice about the number one silverback is that the best one is the one who uses the diplomacy. There's a lot of politics in the gorilla society. And the diplomacy is like our favorites, Titus and Cansby. They are a great example of diplomatic silverback. So are the one that create these friendships and alliances for the welfare of the group. More than their personal individual power, they really, their objective is to create safety and cohesiveness in the group itself. So those are the best leaders. Really interesting.
Great. Thanks, Veronica. And the other thing that the dominant silverback does is sire most of the offspring. Not all of them, but most of them. And this is really where we get to see a different side of silverbacks, more that gentle giant side that we hear about. And just want to play this video and we'll kind of talk through it. But this is silverbacks just having fun playing with kids, which they do a lot. Wrestling with them. I love this one. He just picks them up, kind of like a little stuffed animal. We also see them oftentimes babysitting. So you see the silverback, he's got all these kids around him. The females are probably off feeding somewhere, and the kids will stay near the silverback. He'll provide protection for them because they are vulnerable at this age, even using them as a pillow. This is a Sabakuru who had a particular love of kids and would often hold them, groom them. Again, just that size difference and incredible gentleness. And here you see again a male who's babysitting and all the kids are following behind him. So we talked about the dominant male. Veronica, can you tell us a little bit about the role of those other males that are in the group?
Yes, absolutely. But first, I really love to see these videos of gorilla babies and silverbacks. Like when you observe this thing, you just have your heart full of joy. It's incredible, this relationship between gorillas. Is really fantastic to see, and these videos are amazing. You just ask the role of the subordinate males, and their role is very important. So they are very important for the group safety. So they are, even though they are subordinate to the dominant silverback, they help him to keep the group protected, especially during encounters with other groups. So when one group bump into another group or a solitary male, you really see the importance of subordinate males to help the dominant one. So they may rotate from the one that stays with the females and the younger gorillas to keep them safe, and the one that go to face the intruder. And somehow it's like a dance, and they look at each other, they posture, and they really decide what is his time in his episode. They also get the chance sometime to mate with female. So even if the dominant has the majority of the mating and the access to females, and actually the dominant is the favorite of females, but even subordinate have this chance. In this photo, you can see Vuva, very photogenic, is a very beautiful one. Vuva is the number 1 of the number 4 of Beatsmith's group, and he got to sire 2 of the babies in this group. So even being the number 4 in the hierarchy, he still got a chance, probably because he was really pretty.
See, this is the kind of things we talk about at dinner. Who's pretty, who's not. Thanks, Veronica. We're going to switch a little bit now and talk about bachelors. So we talked about, males can either choose to stay in the group and try and inherit dominance and keep the group stability. They can strike out on their own and try and form their own group, which is a solitary lifestyle. And then sometimes we're lucky enough to see males stay together and form what we call a bachelor group. And so this is usually when the males leave their group at a young age. So maybe they're not ready to be on their own. They still need to learn some social skills. They can even sort of assess potential rivals by interacting together. And there was a very famous bachelor group at Karasoke. It was formed in 1979. It was called Peanuts Group, and it actually stayed together for 13 years until 1992. The membership changed over time, so males would come in when they were young, and they would spend a few years and then go off and try and form their own group. But it was fascinating for us to watch. And then amazingly, we thought bachelor groups were just a regular part of guerrilla society. And we did not have another bachelor group until about, Veronica can correct me, but maybe 2 months ago, when these two showed up on the scene. And so I'm going to let Veronica tell you a little bit about them.
It was a great surprise. At one point, 2 months ago, we saw these two young silverback together interacting with one of the group that we monitor. And just by a closer observation, we saw that they are Antaribi and Wushake, 2 of very well-known males that they were part of a former group, Isawukuru. So we were wondering why these 2 guys are by themselves without the rest of the group. So of course, because we do not miss anything that happens to gorillas, we form an extra team of trackers to follow them every day. And we were sure they would have led us to the main group, Isawukuru. But then, since then, that happened 2 months ago, we are following them every day, and this did not happen. They are just living together. The 2 males, they are still pretty young, age 12 and 13, so pretty young to even be having the ambition to form their own group. So they actually spent most of their time together playing between each other, and it's fabulous to see how they just found happiness and peace in this new dynamic that we are thrilled to observe every day since then. You can see now in the video.
Yeah, so we do have sound for this video because there's a really special noise we wanted you to hear. So you might want to turn it up a little bit. It's soft, and then turn it back down so we don't blow your eardrums out. But this is the 2 boys playing. that is one of my particular favorite gorilla vocalizations. That's a laugh, which you don't often get to hear, but they do laugh when they play, which I just love. All right, so we want to talk a little bit about intergroup interactions. I referenced them earlier. They're probably one of the most intensive sets of gorilla behavior you can ever see. They're incredibly risky for the gorillas because when these groups come together, as I mentioned, the males will target the infants of another male. And the reason for that, it sounds brutal, but it's a very common reproductive strategy in lots of animals. And the reason is females will not breed while they have a dependent offspring. So by killing that infant, not only do you get rid of a rival male's child or infant, but you also, that female will start cycling again, and oftentimes they'll actually leave and join the male that killed their infant. It seems very counterintuitive, but again, remember, females are looking for males that can protect them. And if that male was able to penetrate the wall and get into the group, then he's probably going to be a good protector. And these interactions are also really important because that's when females will transfer between groups. They won't leave and go to a group on their own. They only do it when groups come together. And so these intergroup encounters are really important for the genetic diversity of the population. But Veronica, I know, I have not even seen that many intergroup encounters. They used to be so rare. We would have about one every 2 months. But as the gorilla groups, as the number of groups has grown, they're bumping into each other a lot more, which I alluded to earlier. And so we see them almost weekly now. I know Veronica has seen a lot of them, so I'm going to let her tell you about this particularly special photo, and then we're going to show a quick video where you can see some of it in action.
Yes, thank you. Intergroup encounter. This is probably the most exciting event in the gorilla life. There's a lot of stress associated to these events because of potential risk that the youngster can face or females may transfer. So there's a lot to gain and a lot to lose in just one moment. This in this photo was probably the most adrenalinic day of my life. Was a day that Bitsme's group and Pablo's group met. Pablo's group at that time was 65 gorillas. Bitsme was more than 20. So we had more than 85 gorillas all in a spot, and I was in the middle of that. I was terrified, shaking, and fortunately I could get a few of these photos that you are seeing. This is the beginning of the interaction where you will see the male start posturing and getting very agitated, and while the juvenile and the female are trying to get a safe place far from them. It can last hours. In this video, so you can see how the males posture. You see how they become big because the shoulder gets pumped up, the back gets straight, and they move their face in this strut stancing postures. And this is one typical display by hitting the ground. So let's say that even though it can go on for hours and hours, this is what happens. It's a sequence of displays. It gets very loud because female may scream, infants may scream, and the silverback keeps beating their chest and displaying against each other. Sometimes this display may also end into physical fight. So that is what then it becomes really serious. It's pretty intense. Look at this.
Amazing. I imagine that with all of that testosterone running around, it smells very gorilla-like.
Yes.
And you can imagine the ground shaking as well.
Yes.
Well, thanks, Vera. We weren't able to have any of our Rwanda team with us here today, but we did ask them the question that I posed to Veronica earlier, and I wanted to share some of their thoughts. We asked them who are their favorite gorillas, and this is what they told us. James, who's one of our research assistants, his favorite is Gitcherasi, which is the son of Cansby, and he loves him because he's gentle, humble, and peaceful towards both people and gorillas, and he's very strategic in his leadership. And this is now, he's leading Pablo's group, which is now the largest group we protect. Jean-Paul Hira, who is our gorilla program manager, loved Isabukuru. I've had many a conversation with Jean-Paul. This is the male that particularly loved infants. You can see him holding this baby here. He was also a great leader and really good in conflict resolution. Eric, another one of our research assistants, loves Mafunzo. I love this part because he said Mafunzo is a single male. He's the only male in his group. So it's a bit tough when you're the only male and you've got all these multi-male groups around, and he thinks he's done a great job of sustaining his group for such a long time. And I will say that this is also Sherry's favorite gorilla. We hear a lot about Sherry. And then Felix, who directs our Rwanda programs, loves Cansby. And I love the way that Felix describes him as being a selfless leader, about really caring about his group's integrity. Veronica referred to this earlier, you know, being diplomatics. It's more than just your individual power. It's how do you form these alliances to keep your group together. And I love that he calls them the true definition of a gentle giant, and that he learned important life lessons from watching him. So I was looking this morning before the call to see, and we've actually been honored to study over 100 silverbacks, you know, males that have matured into silverbacks. We've studied many more males than that, but not everyone gets to be a silverback if they die or they move out of the group. But we've called out a lot of them, but I just wanted to mention a few more. So this is Cansby again, and I'm calling him out now just because he is our like resident record holder. He resided over the largest group of gorillas ever known, ever, in any out of any gorillas, 65 individuals. The average group is usually 10. He also has sired the most offspring and had the longest dominance tenure of over 20 years. Over here we have Kubaha, who is a wonderful adopted dad. You see all 4 of these kids that are in front of him. They are all the children of his late brother Isabukuru. And when he died, Kubaha took over. Basically, they were orphans. They were quite young, and he took over caring for these 4 of his nieces and nephews. We've got Nshuti down here at the bottom, and we call him Unlucky in Love. He became a lone silverback right when I started, right after I started with the Fosse Fund in 2003. And in the last, what is that, almost 20 years, he has never stopped trying to form a group. In fact, we just saw him the other day at 32 years of age. He's still around in the neighborhood. He was able to form a group for about 5 years, but has never been sort of successful like Cansby and Titus and others. And then, of course, just want to honor Digit, who was Diane Fosse's favorite gorilla. And the reason that this whole organization was started was in honor of him when he was killed by poachers defending his family. So with that, I just want to thank you all for your support. When I think about, you know, all of the individuals that support the Fosse Fund, our leadership giving group, you are really the silverbacks of our giving, and we depend so much on you to enable all of these amazing programs to happen. And so I want to thank you for being here with us today, and thank you for the incredible support that you give to the organization. And I also want to encourage you to please follow us on social media. We are sharing stories like this every single day. So if you want to learn more about what's happening with the gorillas, social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter is a great place to learn more. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen, and hopefully if we can get that to come up, and go to some of your questions. So I'm going to go to some of the ones that we had come in beforehand, and then we'll try and get to some of the ones that have come in during the course of the presentation. So I have one from Stephanie that was my favorite, and I can't wait to hear your answer, Veronica. What is your most memorable experience with a male gorilla?
Yeah, let's say that I have to think.
You want to think, and I'll share mine, and then you can have a moment to think, because I'm sure you have so many.
Yes.
Okay. You think. I will say one of my most memorable experiences with Nshuti. He was a young silverback when I started watching him, and he was kind of on the periphery of the group, and we were collecting data one day, and the group was moving on, and Nshuti came and charged us. He was just playing, but you know, 400 pounds coming at you is intimidating. I was with another research assistant, and we both kind of like fell down to the ground, and he was behind me. And Nshuti then, like, you know, we couldn't move. He was right there, and he sort of started inspecting me, particularly like around my back, and he was using his big gorilla fingers to poke me in various places, eventually got to my butt. And the research assistant that was behind me goes, "Tara, I just want you to know that that is not me doing that," which I thought was just great. And then Nshuti kind of decided we were boring and moved on, and you know, we caught our breath. But that was one of my most memorable experiences with a male gorilla. Veronica, you have one? Do you think of one yet?
Well, yeah, that is pretty impressive. I have many memories of Titus and Cansby, being together with them has been always like a life lesson every day. Let's say that one of the most memorable experience I may have had with it was with a silverback that we call Buenge. We have the at one point we were like monitoring 3 main groups, one each led by three very legendary silverbacks, and then at one point one young silverback was Buenge, split from one of these groups, and then after just a few weeks that he took this decision, he got 4 females from Pablo's group. And that is that day I was in the field, and I never saw anything like that, because we were just seeing very few female transfer before when we had only 3 main groups. And then in only one day he got 4 all together, transferring from a group to another. And then it was like a full day of displaying and excitement of this young silverback, and we were like applauding to him, because say, okay, that is just a group has started, and we witnessed that. It was amazing.
Awesome. I love Wenge too, so I love hearing that story. And it actually goes well into another question, which is from Clara, who said, do you know what makes male gorillas attractive to a female? And I can tell you part of the answer, and that is, maybe not surprising, bigger is better, but maybe not in the way that you think. But in actuality, we really don't know 100% what makes male gorillas attractive, the same way we probably don't even know in humans what makes, you know, individual humans attractive. But we have been doing some science around this. And there's 2 important components to that. One is genetics. So to know if a male is attractive, we really want to know if they're siring offspring. And so that's where genetic analyses come in. So we know who has had more offspring than others. But recently we started a set of analyses where, using a really special camera, we take photos of the gorillas and we can measure them in real time. And what we did find is that bigger males, particularly that broad shoulder size and the size of their crest, those males form larger groups and have more babies. So there is something about that that does appear to be attractive to females. So that's a great question. We had another question from Liz, and that was, are gorilla interactions always aggressive? And I will say that they aren't, Liz. It's a great question. And we actually just recently published a paper on this. Most of them are that intermediary that you saw, where there's a lot of displaying, like Veronica was talking about. Some we see physical violence, but some are actually quite peaceful. And the amazing thing that we found in the study, looking at more than 20 years of interaction data, is that when groups have lived together before, so sometimes groups will split up, when they come back together, even if it's been a decade, those interactions are much more peaceful. Sometimes individuals will even play than if the groups have never lived together before. And the analogy that we give is kind of like your house. So there are some individuals you don't want in your house at all, and anytime they come near your house, you'll fight with them. There are other individuals you might let in your living room, and that's kind of those former group members. You let them in your living room. It's okay if they're in the living room part of your house. But if they come into your bedroom, your core territory, then it pretty much always becomes aggressive. So the gorillas really distinguish who's coming into who they're interacting with, and where in their particular habitat they're meeting up with these animals, and they defend that core territory much more, even if they've known these gorillas before. And that was an interesting study that we hadn't seen before. Let's see what else. A question from Susan: with the 2 boys playing in the Bachelor group, it seems like they're oblivious to the camera. Does their behavior change with the photographer around? Veronica, what would you say to that?
I would say no. The gorillas that we observe, they have been habituated to humans, so they get used to the presence of a human around. That is why also they can be visited as tourists, and tourists from all over the world come and see the gorillas. And the most amazing thing that you will see is that they don't care about you. And this gives you a great feeling because you have the privilege to just look into nature and being there at that exact point. Looking into nature, being nature, and being a non-human society, acting as a non-human, even if very similar to us. So they do not change their behavior if there are cameras around or any others. What you also will recognize is that they are very smart. So they know that during this habituation process, they know who is the good human and the bad human. So they will act really different from humans that they know as trackers. And then if tourists come, they know that they will come with the trackers or with the researchers. So they are part of the good humans, but they will be very smart to recognize who is a human that wants to hurt them. And then they will change attitude immediately and becoming really aggressive.
Great. Sarah has asked if the paternity of Nzeli's new baby has been determined yet. And no, Sarah, it hasn't. Yeah, to do paternity work, we actually get fecal samples. So we wait till the gorilla poops and then we send it off for the genetics. And so you have to wait for the infant to be big enough to be off its mom, etc. So usually we can't get a fecal sample from an infant till they're about 1. So it'll be a while before we know the paternity of Nzeli's infant.
We can always guess. There is always this game among us and say who's the dad, and we try to guess, and then we can win a soda if we get it right.
We have contests about that, and then also who's going to give birth next. And yeah, there's big competitions on who's buying sodas if they've correctly predicted which female is the next one to give birth. I get all these WhatsApps when I wake up in the morning where all these conversations have been had. It's fabulous. Seth asks a really good question. Do you believe if there's communication between males that allows or gives permission from the dominant to the subordinate males to mate, or is it random by chance? This is a great question, and one of the things that we did look into, and we know that oftentimes dominant males are much more tolerant of subordinate males mating with their daughters. So it's inbreeding avoidance. It's not perfect, but dominant males generally won't breed with their daughters, so they will, subordinate males can breed with their daughters right in front of them. They also, dominant males generally do prefer, they don't even like the youngest females, even if it's not their daughter. I think they really invest a lot more in the older females who they have relationships with, who are proven breeders. That being said, you can often see a subordinate or hear a subordinate off in the bushes copulating, and if the dominant male hears that, he will run and separate. So I think certain times it's tolerated and other times definitely not. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Veronica.
No, I think you said it all.
Yeah. This is a great question from Cindy. She asks, do we have a dominant do we have a dominant silverback that's a great leader now that Cansby is gone? That's for you, Vera.
What a question. Of course it comes from Cindy. we miss Cansby, we miss Titus, because there's no leaders as they were, but we believe that their skills were gained with experience. So we also believe that the current young silverbacks, they will go through maturity and they will become as wise as their fathers. And I'm looking very closely to Gichurasi, who is now leading Pablo's group, because Pablo's group is just a piece of our heart, is the longest observed group. We love every single day of that group. We know everything of all the gorillas in that group. So Gichurasi has a great responsibility, and we look on him every day, and he's doing great.
Great, awesome. We had 2 questions from Lee that are related, so I'm going to answer those. He asks, are the increase in snares related to the increased economic hardship from COVID? And we definitely think that is the case. These communities are really struggling. Livelihoods have been very much affected by the ending of tourism. And so that's why people are going into the forest, not to get gorillas, but to find other food in the forest. And then also ask, are there similar initiatives being planned to Gorilla Guardians? So yes, we have our ongoing programs with local communities that focus on livelihood initiatives. So giving people jobs and opportunities that so they don't have to go into the forest to make money by gathering bamboo or hunting an antelope and then selling the meat, as well as food security. So helping them grow better food, gardens and other things. So those programs are very much ongoing, and they reach our community programs reach the lives of over 20,000 people a year. Yeah. We were excited this year to be able to expand that to Gorilla Guardians, who normally make their own income through the tourism industry, but obviously because it was affected, that they couldn't, and so we stepped in to help them. But yes, these community initiatives, our community initiatives are ongoing, and they're more important than ever given what's happened to local communities.
Yes.
Let's see, what else do we have here? I think we have maybe time for one or two more. This one actually isn't really a question, but it goes straight to my heart, so I just want to read what John said. Thanks, John. He says, it's exciting to hear about all the research that is happening and that so much is still being learned about the gorillas. And I would say, John, that we couldn't agree with you more. I think one of the things we're always surprised by is that after 50 years, the gorillas still surprise us pretty much every day. We're constantly learning new things about them. I always say the gorillas of Dian Fossey's time are different than the gorillas of today. They've organized themselves differently. Yeah. We mentioned the fact that as the population has grown, we have more gorilla groups, so they're interacting more, so that changes the dynamics. And the research is such an important part of what we do, and it's also a very unique part of the Fossey Fund. That's why Dian Fossey started the organization, and it's really a unique role that we play to have the world's longest running database on gorillas. So thanks, and I hope we're going to be able to do some webinars that are really focused on some of the exciting research that we've had come out next year, so please stay tuned for that. Let's see, I'm just looking through, we have a question here. Do we supplement their diet with anything including vitamins? Absolutely not. We very much are hands off. So these are wild animals. We sort of stay in the background and observe them. If they have a life-threatening injury that's human caused, like for example, they're caught in a snare, that's a time that the vets will decide to do an intervention to remove it. But otherwise, these are wild animals, and we want them, we're there to observe them, and they do great on their own. You think about growing from 4 pounds to 400 pounds, they have an incredibly rich diet and they do really well on their own. Meredith asks, how many individual gorillas in total have you studied since Diane's time? Do you know that off the top of your head, Vero? Roughly?
More 400 something.
Yeah, I would say it's probably between 4 and 450. We do know we're 5 generations in. Yeah. And what's amazing is there's no other research site which studies so many gorillas and individual gorillas. So there are sites where they can see a lot of gorillas, but they don't necessarily know them as individuals and they can't follow them. And there's other sites where they know individual gorillas, but maybe they're just studying one group. And so the fact that we have so many groups, we're monitoring 10 right now, and that we know like Veronica said, every single one of them, we know pretty much what they've done every day of their life, makes it a really unique data set, not just for us, but for all the scientists around the world that we collaborate with. Let's see, one more question. I think we got to so many of them. One is, what is the most interesting thing you've seen a male gorilla do? And Veronica, you spoke earlier about Wenge, so I'll tell a story if you don't mind. It's one of my favorites. I didn't actually see it, but one of the research assistants saw it and told me, and I just love it so much. Many of you have probably heard me tell it, but Cansby again, he was babysitting one day. He had all these little kids around him, and he was pig grunting at them, which is kind of a mild vocalization, just a warning, like, And so when he would do that, the kids would walk around him and give him really wide berth. And the research assistant thought this was strange. It was very out of character. So she went to get near him, and he did the same thing to her. So she thought, maybe he's sick, not feeling well. I'm just going to back off. So this went on for a while, and the group eventually moved on their way. And when she went to follow them, she saw that he had been sitting next to a snare. I literally get goosebumps every time I tell the story. He had been sitting next to a snare. And so by aggressively vocalizing at those kids, he kept them away from that snare. But what she was particularly moved by was that she felt like he was also keeping her away from the snare. So we always talk about the gorillas being snare aware, but that's just one of my absolute favorite stories, and just shows how much compassion and how intelligent these animals are. So with that, you guys have been a wonderful audience. Love all the questions. Thank you so much. Veronica, I don't know if you have anything else you want to say. I forgot to mention that Veronica just arrived in Rome. She's in quarantine in Rome after more than a year of being in Rwanda. So we're so happy you could join us, Vero.
Well, I'm really happy that I could join, and so happy to see all the supporters, and I thank you all for keeping us doing the work that we love to do, but most of all, a work that is really important for the people in Rwanda and for the gorillas.
Yeah, great, wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Please stay healthy. Wishing you all a wonderful holiday, and hope that we will all be able to get together soon in 2021. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.